Good evening. Welcome to Book Passage. Thanks for joining us. If we have any new people out there who've never tuned in, welcome to Book Passage. And this is our conversations with authors. We try to bring these to you very frequently. Thank you for joining in. If you are a loyal Book Passage customer, thank you. Thank you for your loyalty and for your support. We really appreciate it. Book Passage can't do it without you. So your loyalty to an independent bookstore is greatly appreciated. So good evening and welcome. My name's Cheryl Bronstein. I'm one of the event coordinators here at Book Passage, and just a really hearty welcome. We're glad you can join us this evening for one of our virtual conversations with authors. Book Passage, as you know, has two locations. We have our store in Corte Madera, and we also have our store in the Ferry Building in San Francisco, and both locations are open 7 days a week. So come on in, you can browse, you can buy your books that way, you can call us on the phone, we will answer it, and you can buy your books through the phone or go on our website. Either way, we are there to help you and really appreciate your business and, again, supporting independent bookstores. We have a very busy winter schedule, and it is all on our website. So please click. If you don't subscribe, if you haven't yet, please do, because you're going to want to hear about the amazing events we have, both in person and virtual. We have a very busy November and a busy December. I'm just going to mention a few of them. We have an in-person event with the amazing poet, Billy Collins. He will be in our Corte Madera store on this Saturday, November 12th at 6 p.m., and he is going to be presenting his newest work called Musical Tables. We also have a virtual event with the very funny Steve Martin on Wednesday, November 16th at 4 p.m. And Steve will be discussing his new book, which is titled Number One is Walking, My Life in the Movies and Other Diversions. And he will touch on his legendary career, his 40 years in the movie business, as well as his stand-up comedy, banjo playing, and writing and cartooning. It should be a hoot. I hope you can join us. Tickets to these events are still available. So again, check out our website, bookpassage.com. And we have a whole list of events. We have them by calendar, and you can just pick and choose what you want to see, because we do have some great things. We also have amazing classes that are both in person and virtual. So again, look at our website, bookpassage.com. Here at Book Passage, our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And Book Passage, I am very proud to say, has been a Bay Area institution for over 40 years. Again, we couldn't do it without our loyal customers. Thank you. We hope to be here to serve you for another 40 years. In the opening story of our featured book, Spell Heaven, a fishwife asks the narrator, "Do you know the difference between a fairy tale and a sea story?" This artful collection of 23 linked stories is both. The hardscrabble characters tell their sea stories, but the sea that surrounds the inhabitants of the small town of Seaview is like a capricious character in a fairy tale. It tosses boats, drowns with rogue waves, yet sometimes it washes up treasures. This is the high praise from the San Francisco Chronicle, and they don't always like everything that they read. So that is quite a beautiful review for Spell Heaven. We are honored to present Spell Heaven by Toni Mirosevich. Toni was raised in a Croatian-American fishing family in Everett, Washington. She's the author of a book of nonfiction stories, Pink Harvest. She's winner of the first series award for creative nonfiction and 5 books of poetry. She is a professor of creative writing at San Francisco State University, and she currently resides with her wife in Pacifica, California. And we are very, very honored to have her with us this evening. And Toni will be joined today by Nina Schuyler. Now, so you know, these two were teacher and student, and Toni was the teacher of Nina, and now Nina is a teacher at Book Passage. So it all goes around. Nina is the author of How to Write Stunning Sentences, which is one of the best sellers at Book Passage. Her novel, The Translator, won the 2014 Next Generation Indie Award for General Fiction and was shortlisted for the Sarian International Writing Award. Quite an honor. She has a new book, Stunning Sentences, Creative Writing Journal, that was published in September of this year, and it is available at Book Passage. She also has a new novel, Afterward, which will be published in May of 2023, and you can pre-order it at Book Passage right now. We are all looking forward to reading that. So it is a great honor to welcome to our Book Passage virtual stage two very talented writers and teachers, Toni and Nina. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
You want to talk first and tell a little bit more about the book before we launch in with questions? I'm so happy to be here with you and talk about your work and your process and how you move in writing. But do you want to set it a little bit, set up the stage for us?
Sure. First, I just have to say it's a treat to be here doing this for Book Passage, but also Nina, it's always a big treat to talk to you. I used to love to talk to you in the classroom. I love to talk to you on our walks.
Mm-hmm.
So just letting you know that and letting the audience know that too. You know, the book, let's just say that a queer female narrator who was raised in a fishing family in an immigrant community finds herself in the academic world. It's a kind of a surprise that she finds herself there. And while that world is a privileged world, it feels foreign to her. It doesn't, it feels foreign and it's funny because growing up, I remember there was a man we used to call the foreigner because he was the most recent one off the boat from Croatia. But the academic world feels foreign. So she and her wife moved to a seacoast town, and she's looking for something. She doesn't quite know what she's looking for, but she's lost something. And down by the sea, she finds this community of people who seem to have found something themselves, and she's drawn to that. She's drawn to their ability to form community and hang out, and she wants to know who they are, and slowly she gets to know them, the Crab King and Johnny Bench and various people at the sea. So she's on the search, but she wasn't sure what she was searching for, but she went down to a place that she felt familiar. Does that set it up good enough? What do you think? What do you think the book was about, Nina?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I want to start with the question. In past interviews, you've said you don't really adhere to genre, and you don't even think about them when you write the different forms, whether something's fiction or nonfiction, an essay, short story. I'm wondering if you could talk about this more, and does it change the way you write and even how you write? And I'm wondering if this sensibility stems from your poetic background that came first before you moved into these other forms, and whether the idea of form itself is confining in some way. Yeah. That to stay formless and to write and to see what emerges. I'm just wondering if you can address this idea of stepping out of genre, out of confinement.
Well, the narrator is stepping out of the confinement of the academic world. And so she's looking for a more boundless place. And I think with genre, it's, I find that it's really useful to be as fluid as possible and to not worry so much. So one can start to write down a little something, and it might turn into a story, it might turn into a poem, it might turn into kind of a mix of them, but you can go back and forth between genres without the sense of being, oh, we have a very set structure that we have to follow. This is the short story structure. this is the particular poetic form. I've always been interested in not staying too confined within within institutions or forms or roles, and so the ability to move fluidly back and forth is a fabulous freedom. You could include some true bits, you can include your imagination, you can include if you were formerly a poet, or you can, along with your bag of needments, you can take all those poetic gifts and bring them into the story. You can use imagery because you brought it along with you from your years of poetry, or vice versa. If you're a short story writer and a fiction writer, I know you write poetry too. So maybe you bring some of those things also into your poems. I don't know, do you?
I do. I think that's true, but I think it's exciting. You know, everyone, I think artists are always looking, what's the next thing? What's the next form? What's the next novel? What's the next shape that something will take form in? And I think this kind of stepping out of the set structure of short story, it makes it really exciting. There's a uniqueness to it. I'll just hold up the book because we haven't seen this beautiful cover. But it's exciting, and it reminds me of Ursula Le Guin's The Carrier Bag Theory, where she posits the question, or at least begins the discussion, as shouldn't we have different shapes of stories other than the hero's journey with the conquest and going out on a journey and conquest and transformation, and one singular character and the battle of that individual. So I'm wondering, I just think that's interesting, that I feel that there's something of the carrier bag element in your work. And there's a lot of, moving from one character at the sea to another character at the sea, and gathering these people. Can you talk about that? Just that kind of different form?
Well, when you and I talked earlier, we were going to, I mentioned something about beckoning, and I think that might have something to do with this here. And that is that, so and wait, let me, two things at the same time. W.G. Sebald used to talk about unsystematic searching, and that he would watch a dog and it wouldn't go from here to there to find a bone in a yard. It would go all around. It was an unsystematic searching. And I think that that's a thing that if you have a narrator or a character who is unsystematically searching, that actually will come up with a form that's fascinating as well. It's not from here to A to B to C to D to, right? And if you allow yourself, again, the freedom to move, sometimes what happens is that, or what happens often in this book, is the narrator will be walking along and she gathers encounters and moments with the people that she meets. She wants to draw closer to them. And she'll see somebody like the woman who appears to be on meth. That's what she looks like in her car. And that will trigger and beckon to a memory that the narrator has of seeing a woman on a bus who is obviously on meth and having a hard time. So if you don't stay to the strict story of, I'm only going to tell that story of that woman in that truck that I see, but it beckons to another fragment and a little bit of a memory of someone else, those things coming together in a piece, if you allow them to come together in a piece, then you're coming up with, I guess, that new story structure, because the pieces that had something in common want to marry together in a piece without having to follow some set predestined idea of what the story was supposed to be about. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but I'm wondering, when you sit down to write, do you have no sense of what she's going to go gather? Or do you just send her down to the sea to see what's there and then let things beckon? So where in the process does the beckoning enter?
She has no idea what she has zero idea. She goes down to the sea. She goes down there, she starts to walk. She sees a person, they say something to her, or they don't. And that person, just by their gait, how they walk, triggers something. This happens to us all the time. You're walking along, you don't know what's going to happen in your day. Somebody crosses your path. You either say hey or don't say hey, but suddenly you're reminded of someone else. And if you suddenly, that memory beckons to that moment, but it's not as if there was a plan. The only plan was that she was feeling somewhat lost and somewhat lonely, and that she was looking for a world that felt familiar and strange at the same time. Familiar because she knows the sea, and strange because she doesn't know these people.
Well, this reminds me then of the epigraph, right? The opening, you put this wonderful opening, this line, you will wake in a dear yet unfamiliar place from Tremble by C.D. Wright.
It's the best. Isn't that just the, I love that quote, because one thing, if you take it apart, you will wake up, you'll wake up into the moment. You'll wake up into a place that's dear. So there's a part of it that's familiar. It's dear to you. It gives you a wonderful feeling. You've felt this feeling before, yet it's unfamiliar. This isn't the sea that the narrator grew up along. So so that contradiction is the most wonderful thing. She's waking up to something that rings a bell, and that is absolutely new. What better thing could happen?
It reminds me, I take a lot of philosophy. It reminds me of Heidegger's "We are thrown into the world." So why that's coming up is that you step out at the sea. The narrator goes down to the sea. She doesn't know what she'll be thrown into, what encounter she'll have.
Exactly.
And I feel that's and again, I'm busy. I'm really curious what the new forms will be for the novel, for the short story. And this seems like, with so much going on in the world, that there's so much thrown at us. Yes. When we step out beyond the confines, the shelter of our house, like, will you step out? What will you possibly encounter?
Exactly. So, but you do have to step out, and you do have to step out so that your trajectory is crossed by some other person's trajectory, and it's always unexpected, almost always. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that would allow something new or something interesting to happen. The Toni Morrison quote is, it's about vaulting the mere blue air that separates us. So the narrator is wanting to vault that mere blue air between her and these people that she's meeting. And what if a person doesn't want to vault back? Or what if it takes a while for the kite man to say, hey, here's a kite for you, and we can be friends. So
there's a risk that there will be no connection, no communion.
Always. That's great. There has to be a risk, and maybe that's back to story, right? There has to be some risk. The risk is maybe she won't be accepted. Maybe she won't. One of the things I often talk about is that the people at the sea I grew up with knew the art of bullshit. They knew how to tell a story. So there's a risk if she walks out onto the pier that people will think, well, who the hell are you? Do you belong here? Are you part of us? And
Well, and the opening story that you have, when the narrator arrives with her wife, they don't belong. And there is the "who the hell are you" tone in the neighborhood. And and the narrator was ready to pack up and leave.
That's right. It's definitely as a queer couple moving into a seacoast town, and the neighbor, the story goes that some kids come and write "bitch" on the fence and throw rocks at the window, and the narrator goes out and says, well, why are you writing? And the kid says, I'm just retracing the letters that are already here. So it was not the most comfortable place to be. And maybe that's, again, a risk, and important and necessary. But, it's also a lot about outsiders. So the couple and the narrator feels like an outsider, and she's seeking a community of outsiders, and the people at the sea are not so interested in status and power and money. And so it's a community of outsiders there as well. And back to your gathering point, right? So she's gathering people that she feels comfortable with, or she wants to be in with.
Well, it's like we're going back to paradox, that familiar, the deer, the deer. Well, we're going back to your epigraph. What am I have to remember?
Dear yet unfamiliar place.
The dear yet unfamiliar place, the paradox. And the paradox seems to be the arc of the story, is that she does find community among outsiders. So they're outside, right? And they're highly unique and individuated, and in their own, they're characters. They're characters. And yet that's the community, right? Yes. So it's somewhat a paradox that among the outsiders, you will find community.
Yeah. Well, it's, I think if I go back to personal history, I think that when I think about growing up in a fishing community, those fishing people and the fishermen on the dock, most of them were from what we called the old country, but they were outsiders to this culture too. So, I mean, again, you sometimes seek what you once had, that feels close and comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely throughout the short stories this sense of a beckoning from the past.
Yeah.
Because the sea, and we can talk about that, the sea as a symbol, an overdetermined symbol, it means a lot of different things, right? But one strong meaning of that image is that your father and the narrator's father was a fisherman, and often was out at sea, gone for long periods of time. So there's a beckoning from the past for the narrator to seek out the sea, and because the sea is attached to father, to seek out memories of father, at least.
But also because you grew up by the sea too, and I know that. Do you also do you feel more expansive by the sea? Do you feel, I mean, is that something that just comes up, whether or not you're from a fishing family or not? I mean, I see people, I'm going to read a story in a bit of people looking out at the sea, and I see them all the time along the promenade in Pacifica, where I live. And it doesn't, everyone's quite different. They look different. They look like they have different politics, different ways of being in the world. And yet they all seem to have this expansive feeling, or they have a look on their faces so that, I mean, can you help me with this?
Well, I agree that I think there's something about the horizon. You write beautifully about the horizon, the sky, and the line of the sky. I forgot your metaphor, but you have some amazing similes and metaphors throughout, and where the two kiss, and there's something about having that expansive line out there. There's nothing blocking the view. So I think it's working, and just it's working on that figurative level that it is expansive. There isn't a building in the way. There aren't walls. But
Yes.
there was in the short story, The Deposit, which is about a young 17-year-old man who drowns in the sea. You write that the television viewing public, the television crews were down there, photographing the sea, for this body. And you write, some of whom were housebound, so they're watching the TV, shut-ins who could not feel the sun on their skin or the sea breeze in their hair, saw the golden glint of light on the waves and were momentarily released from care.
Yes.
That last line was really interesting to me. And can you talk, what care are we talking about? That was really interesting.
Well, and that's the any kind of landlocked cares that you have, your worries, your fears, your everything that is on land that contains or confines you, or that you have anxiety about. There's another great line that I'm probably going to butcher from Sebald, that is, they just want to be at the edge of the sea with the world behind them. And so, and that that's so even if in that particular story, there are people who can't be at the sea, they see it through their screen, and for a moment they're released from care. And I think that that's true of the narrator in the book. I think it's true of a number of the characters that she encounters. I think it transfixes. There's something about it. I don't know if you grew up by the sea, and when you looked at the sea, you just felt, what's to worry, except for the sea itself. Except if you're on the sea, then you should worry.
Then if you're the father out fishing in a storm, and you do have a story where the sea is not so peaceful, and it's violent, and it can take, and so there's that risk too.
Yes, I read with a fisherwoman who Tella Addison up in Bellingham, Washington, and she knows very much about the sea because she fishes up in the Bering Sea. And I was going romantic and poetic about how beautiful it was, and she was like, "Oh, wait a minute." It's nice to be on shore looking at this expansive loveliness, but
It's easy to romanticize if you're not out in the middle of the storm.
That's right. That's right.
Do you want to read now the short story, As If You and I Agree?
Yes. I wanted to read a piece from the book that maybe speaks to, the narrator goes along, and the people that she meets, she ends up loving dearly. And she has to, and slowly over time, she gets to know them, they get to know her. And yet it's not always lovely, is it? And it's not always easy. And there's also tension, and there's people that don't get along. And this is a piece that was written in the midst of the pandemic, and it'll be about the sea, but also about some other tensions that happened during the pandemic. And so I'll read that now, As If You and I Agree. At the start of my walk, I overhear a passerby say, "The whales are back." The entrance to the berm is blocked by earth movers. Behind those machines, a work crew out early on this foggy morning grades the dirt pathway with wide rakes in long, low movements, as if gathering up mown hay in a field. The berm, this raised barrier, separates the beach on one side from a public golf course on the other. And it's unusual to see people at work this early, to see anyone so industrious these days when little industry occurs. People on their morning constitutionals walk by the trail access closed sign at the entrance, and I can tell by how their gaze lingers on the workers that they're longing to be that occupied, to have a specific job to do, something, anything, to give structure to their newly unstructured days. Once on a visit to a nursing home, my wife came upon an elderly woman in a wheelchair, shouting out a plea to anyone within earshot. Give me something to do. Give me something to do. Come on, come on, come on, come on, give me something to do. She repeated the chant over and over, one continuous, never-ending refrain, hoping someone would give her a task that would ease the unending tedium of her everyday. Often the best way forward is to circumvent and to find a way around. So I pass by the blocked berm entrance as if I'm heading towards the sea. And once beyond the watchful eye of the work crew, I climb back up onto the large rocks that edge the berm and gain access to the berm's hard surface and start this walk I've missed so much. On this long, straight stretch, I can now see what I've longed to see each morning. Here, with the wide bowl of the sea and the sky before me, this expanse brings with it an expansive feeling, as if some door that's been locked has been opened wide. For the past 6 months, my visual field has contracted, stopped short at the walls of each room in the house and the boundaries of our fenced yard. As I walk, I scan for whales, but I see no plumes, no spouts, just the flat blue lines of a corduroy sea, as a surfer friend calls it. The usual hordes of walkers and tourists and day trippers are nowhere to be found. There's a couple up ahead, and in the distance, someone else with a dog. A woman heading my way veers right to hug the opposite edge of the path, and as she nears, she pulls up her mask. I adjust mine and give her a little wave. She waves back. Maybe it's that small acknowledgement that we're on the same page with staying safe that brings to mind today's early morning encounter at the grocery store. Senior hour. The worker at the grocery store at 6 a.m. is already stocking shelves when I arrive. I turn the corner onto an aisle and see her standing on a short stepladder stocking cereal boxes. I've seen her on past visits here, either at the checkout stand or stocking shelves. She looks about in her 40s, black hair pulled back in a ponytail, her mask covering half her face. I can't see if she's smiling or grimacing or looking blank. What I can see is when she puts another box on the top shelf, there's a weariness to the gesture. I stand back and watch for a moment. There's something about her solitary stance, her inwardness that I respond to. Maybe she's an introvert like me. She looks both sleepy and focused, as if she's somewhere else, not here. I have no idea what she's thinking as she lays out the march of cereal boxes, or if she's thinking at all. All I know is that she looks deep in her world, or in some other world. I could watch her a long time. If I stared long enough, maybe I could begin to imagine what her inner world looks like, but I've got to get going. So I move a little closer, make like I'm scanning the shelves, all the while keeping a ways away from where she's standing. She stops what she's doing, turns to face me, asks if she can help. I point to a box of grape nuts, and as she hands the box down to me, both of us reach our arms out as far as possible to keep our distance. And I say, thank you so much. And thanks for being here. How are you doing? It's 6 a.m. I don't know why I ask. If I had to be at work at 6, I wouldn't want someone up in my face. I immediately feel I've made a mistake, interrupting what quiet moments she's having before the hordes come in. Is it the fact that there are just the two of us standing in this aisle that creates some sense of intimacy, of closeness, in a world where anything approaching closeness now feels in short supply? She steps down from the ladder and looks at me and says, "It's so hard. People are so angry." She proceeds to tell me how people yell at her and that because she's of Chinese descent, she gets a double dose of venom. I don't get it. They come right up to me, right up to my face, pull their mask down and start right in, pissed about something. If I ask them to mask up politely, they start in, "Who do I think I am?" as if I'm the one who. She stops and shakes her head. At that moment, I realize I have no idea what she has to go through. Can't imagine that kind of onslaught all day long. Do you think they'll finally take it seriously when the second wave hits, she asks. I tell her I hope so. I tell her I don't get it either, why people are the way they are. I tell her I'm sorry. You know, it sounds like you and I agree, she says. I have to tell you, I'm relieved to find someone who feels the way I do. I thank her and leave with my box. Looking back, I see her step back on the ladder and return to her labors. I think 40 hours, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Those are very structured days. My foot hits a rock, I trip, stumble, immediately feel embarrassed, as if this will end up on someone's funny home video channel. I need to wake up and look where I'm going. I've been in another world. Who knows what I've missed? Well, I've been on that grocery aisle, almost at the end of the berm at the fork. Then, and to the right, there's a small cypress tree that stands at the cliff's edge. A slim path curves around it, just enough for one person to get by. One misstep and you could tumble down the cliff to the beach below. This tree marks the spot I used to claim as my own personal writing residency. I'd sit at the base, my back against the trunk, a perfect spot to sit and stare out at the sea. The exposed roots of the tree rose up from the packed dirt and encircled me like the armrests of a chair. As if one grand viewing spot wasn't enough, the tree offers a second incredible perch. Months ago, some visionary hung a driftwood plank from the upper branches of the tree and created the perfect swing. I step onto the narrow path and see the swing is still there. Someone has even decorated it. Yellow and red roses are woven into the swing's ropes, a take on nature's embroidery. I go to sit down, then notice on the board there's a small photograph covered in plastic, a young man's face smiling up at me, a dedication. Who was he in life? Did he used to sit here and swing and look out and try to make sense of all that doesn't make sense in the world, as others have done, as I did? What were his hopes and wishes as he swung back and forth, his beliefs and his opinions? What was his favorite cereal? The swing has become a memorial to this young man. I feel some strange kinship with him and with all who've been here before, everyone who has ever sat here swinging. There's that expansive feeling again, coming up out of nowhere. Something connects us even if we've never met, even if we don't know each other's names or what each of us had for breakfast. I sit down on the swing and look out at the sea. The morning fog has lifted and taken the gray away. What's left is a shining blue field. A song I love, Killing the Blues, comes to mind, and I start to sing it softly to no one, to all of us who've gathered here. After a while, I start back. There are more people on the berm, groups of 2 and 3 walking together, single joggers, more dogs. 30 feet or so away, there are 2 older men are standing and they're talking to each other. One in a nylon green windbreaker, facing a man dressed in black pants and a jacket, short buzz cut. Both are older, meaning my age. Even from this distance, I can tell they're having an animated conversation. Both are unmasked. My eye drifts down to their necklines to see if there's a fold of fabric or a mask dangling there, wrong on both accounts. Their necklines are free and naked. Those unadorned necks are making a statement. Find a way around, circumvent. As I get near, I walk a long arc from where they are standing, as far as the berm path will allow. Still, part of their exchange drifts over. The man in black is saying, I don't care for Trump, but how many times have I heard this very beginning to a speech? I don't care for the tweeting, but I don't care for the way he bullies, but I know what comes next. An excuse, a justification. Well, the other side is worse. I catch another snippet. Marching towards Marxism. The man on the bike chimes back, yeah, and then there's AOC. Even though I tell my wife it's not helpful to put rage-filled messages on social media aimed at right-wing nut jobs, I can't stop myself. I stare their way. I stare straight at them, as if my stare is a sharp arrow that can speed from where I am to where they're standing and just shut that conversation down. And then I do the next unhelpful thing. I stand facing them and I adjust the bridge of my sunglasses with my middle finger. I deeply adjust the bridge. I push the bridge way up. I allow my finger to linger there long past the period of adjustment. They keep talking to each other. They never glance my way. I imagine one of them saying, I'm glad to have found someone who feels the way I do. Two men at the end of the berm together in their maskless beliefs. Maybe they'll take it seriously the second wave. People are so angry, and now I'm angry too. I look out to the sea, wave after wave, at the wide whale corduroy. I take a breath, take it down a notch, take in the sky, the sea, a balm that calms, and then begin to wonder, if the young man who died was standing here right beside me, what would he do or say? Or the workers at the entrance to the berm, or the woman at the grocery store? I know one thing. If I was putting boxes of Fruit Loops up on the shelf, I wouldn't get to witness any of this. The view, the swing, how I wish she could be here right now to see that sky, that sea, that there, right there. A whale breaching, a huge humpback rising up out of the sea, straight up like a huge middle digit. Is it my imagination, or is that finger lingering there a second longer than usual? I look down the berm. Everyone has stopped walking. Everyone is standing at the edge of the berm, looking out, transfixed by this sight. Magnificent, otherworldly. I turned around and looked back at the two men. They too have stopped talking. Their mouths so open, birds could build. All of us, for a moment, we all feel the same way.
Thank you. Well, that as you went along, the other thing that came to mind is in carrying or picking up things or gathering things is the images. You know, the cereal, it's very funny. The cereal keeps coming up. You know, I don't know what cereal that the man with the photograph on the swing, you know, what he eats for breakfast. So I'm wondering, my question is about images. And I know as a poet, you concentrated and focused a lot on images. And I'm wondering, as they appear on the page, are you aware of the figurative implications of images immediately? Or does that come later, or a little of both?
Never. It's so good. No, I'm not aware of it. No, I'm not aware of it. I'll notice if an image returns and returns and returns and returns. In the very first poetry book I wrote and that was published, the editor said, "Sea green, you use that an awful lot." She was telling me that I can overdo it, but I think that I'm going to say that I truck in images. That images are the thing that I'm the most interested in, and that they come up as they come up. But I never make once again, I'm probably one of the most unplanned ones around in terms of thinking, oh, this image will go good here, or this image will go good there. I think after a piece has been written and revised many, many times, there might be a sound pattern that recurs, or if an image has come early, if it's changed by the end. Like, let's take the cereal box. There's the cereal boxes. She's reaching up. There's a piece I didn't read in here, so to trim it down, and there's even more about cereal boxes. So initially you get that picture and it's on the shelf, but it's got to be changed in some way and animated. And I don't think about this, but I think that's what happens in the story. Now the man, it's like, well, what do we all eat for breakfast? What do you eat for breakfast? What do I eat for breakfast? What kind of cereal did he eat? And so something has changed, but the image, I think one thing I used to try to teach is to keep an image in motion. So that would, I think, Nina, that might work. Would that work? Would that work as a lesson? Yes.
That works at a yeah. I mean, I feel, what do I feel? I feel that they get, gathered and clustered together, and then you carry them along, like, and they change. So like you flip off the two Trump supporters, and then the whale seems like it's a huge middle digit. So the image carries along. Like the narrator is not only gathering outsiders and people, but gathering images, and then they echo and change over the course of a story.
That's very, very true. And if she hadn't given them the middle digit, it would never have worked. So she needed to do that so that whale could come up like that. No, I think, and again, because some of these stories did, let's just say, come from life experience that I then imagined into, is, it's just, I don't know why the mind does that, but that you see, if you see a middle digit and then you see a whale, well, my goodness, they are both going straight up. There you go.
Well, I think at one of our walks, I think I was saying how much, a plot leaves things out and you have to find associations. And I think you said, well, everything is associated with everything. So it was like the whole world expanded all of a sudden with that, like, wow, everything, you could find connections everywhere.
But don't you think that's true? It happens all of the time. And but I do think, and I think it happens it's just instant. You don't like, oh, I think I'm going to compare this to this. It just occurs. There's so many ways in which, and again, it would be lovely if, and that's maybe the end of the story. Everyone in the story was connected for a minute at the very end. Everybody who had such wildly different opinions and wildly different views, and we've just come through an election cycle, and we've seen that, obviously, which was one of the reasons I chose it. But that to feel not just associations, but that people could be connected. Yeah.
Well, and that led me again back to this different shape of finding connection rather than a solitary heroic character not finding associations or having some goal that was beyond that. I mean, there is a goal to alleviate loneliness and to find a community. So there is character arc, but it was just interesting to watch this other kind of, collection going on and associations going on, the gathering motion that goes on of memory, of images, of people, to stop in the grocery store and have the narrator ask at 6 a.m., how are you doing?
Yeah. Well, it's a desire for a more democratic story, in that it's not just, we aren't going to just focus on the hero or the narrator. There's a wonderful quote, and it's from Elizabeth Strout. What is it? Oh, don't you want to just, I want to know what it's like to be you. And in it, so, and here it's like, so there can be a story structure where it's not just revelation for the narrator or they have slayed the dragon. It's like, oh, we're all in it together. And then you have to democratize the characters in a story, and everyone gets a part and a role, and no one gets to be special. Is that maybe?
Yeah, I think that, and I think it's throughout the whole collection that people that are on the outside, the misfits, the ones that are viewed as detritus, even have a role.
Yeah.
and the narrator approaches and makes a connection and asks, "How are you doing?" To
Well, or they ask her. I mean, you know,
Mm.
and again, yeah, or they, or like the Crab King says, "Hey, how you doing? You know, who are you? Well,
Mhm.
come on to the pier, and I'll introduce you to Lobo, and we'll shoot the shit." You
Mhm.
know, so it's a lucky thing. It's a lucky thing when that occurs in life.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the chat. I see a couple questions. If you have questions, you can send them in. They're coming in. The sea plays such an important role in our stories. Do you live near the water, and do you make an effort to do beach walk for inspiration?
I have to walk to at the. I mean, I'm very very lucky in that I live in Pacifica, and I walk. Uh, have to walk those dogs every day, but again, also incredibly fortunate to be retired right now from teaching, so I get to walk by the sea a lot. So um, if I walk by the sea, I'm always. I mean, the last couple days have been stunning. It's just out of this world. And that's in the middle of great tension about the election
Mhm.
and great tension about what was going to happen and what's going to occur. And it was, so I was inspired to let go of an extraordinary amount of anxiety about things just walking
Mhm.
along. So I used to get inspired. I often, if I write down something and then I walk, something else will trigger. So it's kind of ambulatory writing, right? That would be, that's probably, uh, that's probably, I
Like,
have to do it. Have to
yeah,
do it.
but there's also something, especially writers or anyone with concentrated work, the mind needs to concentrate and then go diffuse, become diffuse or expansive. So
Do you do that?
I do that. I do
I,
that. It's like after a while, my brain hurts in a way. Like it needs to just not think, not focus. So it's
yes.
kind of like a beach rhythm, like a sea rhythm. Like
Yes.
there's a concentrate and then open. Roll in, open up, and roll out, or something.
And then
So
on those walks, do things come in?
sometimes, but often no. But I know it's just part of what the mind needs
Good.
to
Yeah.
have that rhythm, to open it up again and walk around the block, walk the dog, stare at a flower for no particular reason except it's beautiful, or you know even the garbage on the ground, stare at that. Who knows why, just looking.
Perfect. 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 Yes. Looking,
That's
looking, looking.
Yeah, it's were you more or less productive with your writing during the pandemic?
That's a good question. I don't know about if I was productive or not. I, I wrote some things down. um, this book came out during, at the end of, at the start of 2022, somewhere in there. So uh, I was working on the book, but I'm not sure. I'm always writing a little something down.
Yeah. There's another question. You said you grew up with a family of storytellers. Do you pull from stories you have heard from your family members?
Absolutely. I mean, my both grandparents were from Croatia. Um, Fishing people mostly tell stories. I I I I I'm I received the gene. I
And I
received.
think I think you told me your mom sang, because I asked you once about your rhythm and sound. Your sentences are filled with rhythm and sound. And I think you brought up your mom singing all the time.
My father was at sea all the time, and she sang and sang. I know the American Songbook backward and forward, and she also had a wonderful way with people. So she could sing. She sang, and those rhythms. I think also growing up in the house, it was Croatian and English. So you're always listening to two languages, and there's the musicality of both, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I see Cheryl up there.
Yeah. Can we ask one more question? This is Mono Okay asked Toni, do you have an oblique strategy for us?
You know, you know, the truth is that the other thing that I do every single day of my life is that I pick an oblique strategy from Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt's card game. And if you have a dilemma, or you start the day and you want to know, you want to figure out what to do, you pick a card. And so I pick one every morning. So I'm going to pick one for this person right now. Are there sections? Consider transitions. That's the card today. Okay.
Can you read it again? Read it again.
Are there sections? Consider transitions. How would you have done it? I could go on and on. This is, you know, it's kind of, my favorite one is go outside, shut the door.
I will.
I have a whole book of poetry where I picked a card and then I would write a poem. So this is actually the daily ritual, but thank you for asking.
Great.
That is something. Boy, I that's kind of a first. I haven't heard many authors who will pick a card and then kind of that becomes their structure for the day. So that is very unique. But it's obviously served you well because Spell Heaven is fabulous. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Toni Mirosevich, Nina Schuyler, both amazing authors, and we are so grateful that you were able to spend an hour with our Book Passage community. Again, the book is Spell Heaven. It is available at Book Passage right now, and it's a wonderful, wonderful addition to your library. It's a great gift for a family member or a friend. And these are the conversations with authors. They're free events. They're online and they're also in our store. And the reason we can offer free events is because you buy your books at Book Passage. So again, I want to thank you for joining us, for tuning in, for listening to these amazing two authors, joining in our classes and buying your books at Book Passage, supporting independent bookstores and incredible authors like Nina and Toni. Thank you.
And thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Nick, behind the scenes for setting this all up. Thank you, Nina, as always. Afterward is coming in May of next year. Stunning Sentences right now. Yep. Anytime you could take a class or listen to Nina speak, you're a fortunate one. So thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.